Hello, and welcome to the first in a series of videos on Second Chance Heroes, made by developer Rocket City Studios. My name is Elie Platt, and I am the lead level designer on this project. So what we've got here in front of us is a look at the first level of the game, the mandatory Funzone. We affectionately refer to it as 1141, but more on that later. The first two videos, or rather levels you'll be seeing in this video, are going to cover levels built by Roland Ryan, and the rest of the levels in this video were built by me, Elie Platt. So right now we're kind of seeing everything going on, all of the light maps, all of the sounds and everything. So the first thing I'm going to do, and for the rest of these videos as well, is toggle off all of the effects so we can get a good look at the actual contents and layout of these levels. Now that I've done that, I'm going to provide for us a little bit more screen space, because we're not going to be editing levels, so a lot of these tools aren't going to be very helpful. Now that I've gotten those out of the way, we've got an excellent view here of the mandatory fun zone. So before I really dig into this particular level, allow me to describe to you a couple of the things going on here in the mall. The mall is the first world in the game, and this, of course, the first level in the game. And the mall is sort of where zombies always seem to attack. You've got, your various zombie movies taking place in malls, etc. It's sort of a running joke. So we decided that we would also start in a mall. And doing that actually faced us with a number of interesting level building challenges, because malls aren't exactly friendly when it comes to building a video game. A lot of the time, people sort of look and say, well, why is a mall different than an office building? Well, a mall has an awful lot of variety in it. You're not just in rows of cubicles and offices. You're actually in all these little sub-environments: bookstores, jewelry stores, clothing stores, hallways, back halls. And then we didn't want to just have all these sort of generic things, so then on top of that we wanted special stores like movie theaters and disco clubs and arcades and things that wouldn't be in every single level. And so we ended up having to build an awful lot of assets. To complicate matters further, the mall was built effectively before the game was really even totally formed, and as a sort of a test to just kind of build anything and get it out there, since we were developing our own engine. And so when we started building mall levels, we sort of just had like walls and floors and a collection of junk that sort of looked like it belonged in a mall, not really things purposely built to be in a mall and to be in a level. And so we sort of grew to love what we had built, and actually a lot of that was built before I started at the company, and decided that we were going to keep it. But then, as level designers, it was a challenge to actually take this sort of collection of stuff that belongs in a mall and build a mall out of it. So this level, like I said, was built by Roland Ryan, and then it was later heavily modified by me. I guess the easiest way to kind of go over this is to just sort of do a run-through of the path a player might take. And we're going to be doing these sorts of run-throughs in editor as opposed to in-game, because, well, I mean, you could sort of play the game for yourself, or you could look up a Let's Play. Although I will be making a few spotlight videos on some special levels here, but this is really a behind-the-scenes sort of look at the game. One of the things right off the bat, actually, that you'll notice is that we have this sort of multi-tiered, almost like a cake sort of design, where once you get to a certain point, it just sort of drops off, and there's these extra levels here. And a lot of this is going to be obscured by view distance fog. But the original premise of this was that we were going to build a mall that had 7 levels that represented the 7 sins. So each time you beat a level, you would move on to the next sin, and the whole mall would be themed that way. But once we realized how many assets it actually took to build a mall in the first place, we didn't want to build 7 themed versions of the mall just to push forward that fact. So we dropped the idea that the mall was this descent into hell and decided to go with a more contemporary mall, but we kept the abyss. And at one point we did talk about taking it out, and the kind of world building that we'd have to go back and do to, add stores and things out here. And we took a good hard long look at it, and we decided we actually liked the abyss. It kind of gave us an opportunity to add some spookiness, some wackiness to the mall that was kind of just pushing forward the creepy vibe of the zombies and whatnot. And it actually, I think, adds atmosphere. I mean, And you'll see sort of this theme towards the absurd as the game goes on. So to do a quick run through here, and I'll give you a bit of a zoomed out view, a better view than what you would see as a player. You start here in the safe room. And all the safe rooms, at least in the mall, are these sort of security offices with this elevator. And we wanted them to be very identifiable, especially early in the game. So you start in the security room, you actually head out the back door into the bathroom, out through this sort of convenience store into the hallway. You're chased down the hallway by a number of snowblowers into this bookstore, and as you progress down through, you get your first good view. It's sort of a mini reveal because you're coming from above it, of the abyss, where you then move up and encounter your first boss of the game. It's one of the repeating like mini or mid bosses, the Karate Klutz. After you defeat him, you come up and you turn on our disco club. Yes, our mall has a disco club. After turning it on, you don't have access straight through. It's a little hard to tell without the shading here, but this is actually a separate floor, and you turn on this control panel and it fires up the disco, and then you head up the stairs into the security sort of warehouse section, and then you use the back halls to traverse your way around the jewelry store into the disco club. And so that's one of the things there, I think, that really demonstrates the silliness of our world, is that our mall has a disco club in it for reasons unknown. And that was one of the things that we wanted to do, so we wanted to have this world that the player could believe. You could go into it and look at it, and we didn't have to tell you that it's a mall, but you can look at it and say, look, I'm in a mall. Like, that's pretty cool. But then we could also be silly and wacky and over the top and do things like a disco club and have it sort of all mesh together. Here you're introduced to the second boss, who is also a mid-boss, sort of repeatable boss, the Blood Top, whose mechanics allow him to spin around and throw blood at you and all kinds of crazy things. And then you come out into the hallway and into this final area. So the modifications that were made from the original design of this level, originally all of the hallways, and not just in this level, but in the entire mall, were too narrow. We went with this sort of close-in thing, and eventually we ended up making the characters bigger, and then we ended up zooming the camera out a little bit, and then it started to get really claustrophobic. So we went back to a lot of the older mall levels, this one included, and just sort of stretched out all of these hallways. Another change that we made was that, when I say hallways, I mean like even this out open area is considered a hallway. So coming down here, it used to be much, much narrower. And then we also used to have X-ray. So when you were walking behind storefronts like this, you would see outlines of your character, and it was too expensive to do, particularly like on the iPad and things. So we ended up going in and taking, there used to be stores up here instead of this balcony, and I ended up taking all of those stores and actually just shoving them under the floor, moving them down and in under the floor, and then building this facade of storefronts in front of them to give the players a nice open view as they started the level. And then also this hallway used to dead end into the bookstore, and the bookstore front was over further, and so I built this hallway in between here in order to just make it feel more mall-like, because in a mall you don't really run into dead ends that don't lead outside. Otherwise you'd end up having to walk through stores to get to other stores, and so I opened that up and made this area wider as well over here, to just sort of seem like this big plaza instead of just a hallway type area. And then also at the end of this level, originally you defeated the boss and the level was over. And while that's okay, our dungeons are divided into two halves. So you have mandatory Funzone Part 1 and Part 2. And so for the Part 1s, I don't know that we obey the rule 100% of the time, but we did want to, at least in the mall, have Part 1s end in a safe room. And so we ended up having to build on to the end of it, or rather I ended up building on to the end of it this space over here that I've highlighted for you with another safe room, and sort of foreshadowing into the next level, because in the next level you start in this room, but in this level you end in the elevator room. Alright, well, so that wraps things up for 1141, and it does take a little time to load between levels, so I'm going to pause the video